Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second Career Prep seminar. I'm so glad to see so many people here. This is amazing. So as you all know, we have our lovely speaker today, Doug Silver, who's going to be going over how he has gotten into geology, where he is, and how he got there. And he is a geoscience alumnus that's been with Orion Resource Partners. He's the portfolio manager there, and he has more than 40 years of experience in the field. So please give a warm welcome to Doug Silver, and yeah.
Off we go.
Off we go.
So good morning, everybody, and thank you for making time to listen to me blather. I need to start by saying that I'm just an ordinary person, like all of you, but I've had an exceptional career. And I would attribute it to two main factors. One is being in the right place at the right time, or knowing that you're in the right place at the right time. And the other is keeping an open mind. And I have done a lot of things in my life without the formal education. But you can always, learning is a lifelong process. And it's not just what you do at university. So I'm going to continually emphasize this. And what Arizona really does is it teaches you to think and problem solve. And then you use those lessons in no matter what field you go into. Marie asked me to speak because I'm a geologist who doesn't really do geology anymore. And what I wanted to do is, because we have a short amount of time, and I assume most of you are fairly young and are thinking about careers and career decisions, I'm really going to focus on 10 lessons that I've learned, and I'll do it by telling you sort of my life story and how these things link together. So to give away the whole story, here's the 10 lessons. And let me just sort of run through it. First of all, if you go way back, like late Cretaceous, I was born in New Jersey, which is hardly a mining state, hardly a good geology state. So I started out with a huge deficit, which I had no background. I never collected rocks as a kid or anything. What happened is I always loved animals, and I knew that I'd be in the natural sciences. And when I went to college, which was the University of Vermont, I was pursuing a degree in zoology. Because of circumstances, I finished that at the end of my sophomore year. But having been in an all-male boarding school for 4 years and living in a co-ed dorm, there's no way I was getting out in less than 4 years. So I had 2 years to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And in my family, we have a very strange thing. My great-grandfather was a guy named Daniel Moreau Barringer, who has been credited with discovering the meteor crater in northern Arizona, the Barringer Crater. And he was a mining engineer out of Philadelphia. In 1907, he told the world that he thought it was made by a meteoritic impact. Everybody thought he was a nutcase. He then proceeded to do what all good mining engineers do and spend the family fortune trying to find something that had vaporized upon impact. But I knew about this in the family. It was kind of a little quirky thing. And so I said, I'll go take a geology course. And what happened was it completely transformed my interests. And so I wanted to take a course in meteoritics, which, believe it or not, there was a professor there who was an expert on lunar finds. And he actually taught a graduate level class in meteoritics, but he told me I couldn't take it unless I took all the undergraduate classes. So now my dilemma switched. Rather than not wanting to leave school, I had 2 years to finish a second degree, and I finished it in geology. So then this is kind of lesson number one, which is, why would I switch from something I loved my whole life into an entirely different field? And the answer is really quite easy. I was in my 20s, I didn't know anything, and it just sounded more interesting. And I had professors that got me interested in geology, and it completely changed my direction. So I went to this lunar finds specialist, and I said, well, I need to go to grad school. I hear you can make money in mining, oil and gas. Where should I go? And you'll all love this since you're Wildcats. He said, you should apply to the University of Arizona. And I said, well, why? And he said, because all around Tucson are some of the world's largest iron mines. So I spent the first 6 months in Tucson trying to find these iron mines, and all I heard about were copper mines. So again, sometimes you get to where you need to be, but not by an obvious path. So I came to Arizona for grad school, and for me, that was when learning really, really kicked in. And to succeed in the minerals industry, you really do need a master's degree. I mean, if you want to move up through the ranks, you need that knowledge. You don't necessarily need a PhD, but a master's is kind of a prerequisite. But when you're in grad school, it's quite different from undergrad. In grad school, everybody is there with a common purpose. We're all trying to turbocharge our knowledge. So it's not like undergraduate where you're taking a course with like English Lit or something where you have people from all these different disciplines taking the same course. In grad school, everybody is only there to study basically the same thing. And why is this important? Well, one reason it's important is that even today, 40 odd years later, some of my best friends are fellow Wildcats. We went to school together, we've kept in touch, we've done business together. You make truly exceptional friends in grad school. And then the other thing, of course, is the professors. I got to be schooled by John Gilbert, Spence Tidley, and a professor you've probably not heard of named Dick Bean, who was a phenomenal chemist. These guys are not just professors because they can communicate well. These people are experts in their field, and because of their communication skills, they're also leaders in their field. So when you're at a university like Arizona, you're actually learning from the best of the best, and that makes you a hell of a lot better. And you carry that with you the rest of your life. And many of the lessons I learned, particularly from John Gilbert, who I went on a graduate school field trip to South Africa. You spend a month with a professor of his caliber, you learn a lot about life and obviously even more about geology. So next problem, I got to get out of grad school, I got to get a job, but I'm from New Jersey with no work experience. This was very difficult. I can't tell you how many interviews I had where everybody said, well, you don't have any experience, why should we hire you? And finally, I sat down with the last of these and I said, am I wasting my time here? Because somebody has to give you a first job. How do you get your first job? Well, again, I told you at the beginning, being in the right place at the right time. I happened to be at an AIPG conference in Salt Lake. And for some strange reason, being a geologist, I was in the bar. And I sat down next to a guy who turned out was a district manager for one of the world's largest copper companies. And he not only hired me, but he also gave me a scholarship so I could pay the rest of my grad school. Okay, so the concept about hanging out in bars is not what I'm emphasizing here. It's the idea that you network. How do you network? Because when you network, you widen your opportunities. And I can tell you from experience that you can never network enough. And particularly for young people who haven't been in the business world yet, and I've given this speech at Arizona 100 times, when you go to a conference where there's going to be industry people, you have to have a business card. Give them the business card. It gives you a reason to follow up saying, remember I gave you the business card, do you have any jobs? It's a very simple way of getting through the door as opposed to all this, I hear about this online resume sending, you become a number. This is a people business. You need to find a way to touch base with them one-on-one. The other, of course, is to meet one person in the mining business and have them introduce you to other people. That's really important. So I got my first job working for Anaconda. I got very lucky. First year, I was living in Rico, Colorado. We made a discovery of a large porphyry molybdenum deposit. And from that, I got promoted into the main office in Denver. And at the time, Anaconda was building the first ever acquisition team. So the acquisition team consisted of 4 people, and I was the youngest member of the team by at least 20 years. And I got to work with these guys for 2 years, and these guys all had 30, 40 years experience. They knew every mine, they knew every mining executive. And of course, we did all this without computers. Those days, we used number 2 pencils and accounting paper to keep stats. Anyway, what happened was, I figured out, well, if we're going to go buy a gold deposit, we should know where all the gold deposits in the world are and go buy the best ones. So I started building these large databases. And I was really quite grateful when they invented computers because it simplified things considerably as opposed to doing it on paper. So then the next chapter was Anaconda was owned by Atlantic Richfield, which was called ARCO at that point. And ARCO made a mistake. Oil and minerals didn't mix. And so they laid us all off. So here I am, age 27, new wife, 8 months pregnant, who also worked at Anaconda, and we both got laid off on the same day. And if you want to have a life-altering experience, it's leaving a company you expected to spend a career with and realizing you had no networks. What are you going to do? And I can tell you, because I've been laid off once, I've been fired once, and I've quit a number of times, that the sun will come up the next day. And what you got to do is you got to regroup, lift yourself up by the boots, and start making phone calls. So again, I keep pushing this idea of networking, but quite frankly, I think it's absolutely one of the most important things you can do. Now, because I worked in the acquisition team, I was supposed to have a background in accounting and finance, which I had never taken in a course. All 12 years in college and grad school, I had never taken a course. So how did I get that? Well, Anaconda was good and they put on short courses, but most of it was on the job training. But because I had learned how to think, and remember, if you're a geoscientist, you're an observational scientist. You're learning how to look at facts and make analysis of it. Well, pretty much everything you do in life is a matter of doing analysis. So the training I got at Arizona really prepared me well. And so now I had to learn accounting and finance. Wasn't that hard? Everybody learns it at one point. You just had to keep your mind open and find it interesting and learn. So that was when it really dawned on me about the nature of education. It is a lifelong process. Arizona teaches you how to think and how to problem solve, but then you spend the rest of your time, the rest of your life applying it. And this is really key. I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm finally out of school, I don't have to study anymore. Not true. You should want to study every day. You should always want to try to expand your knowledge any way you can. So moving right along, got laid off. I got a job working for some Australians that had bought the Coliseum Gold Project in California. I was their chief geologist, doing reserve calculations by hand on graph paper, which is a bit different from how you do it these days. And the owner of the company was a man named Alan Bond, who at that point was one of the richest men in Australia. And he came to Denver and asked me to give him a presentation on this mine he'd bought sight unseen. And I did. And when he got done with it, he said, you know what? I think you should run our investor relations program. He says, you've got the gift of gab. You know more about the projects than anybody else. You're now in charge of investor relations, which, you know, that's a long way from geology. But the money was good and it was a new challenge, and yeah, why not? So I did that. And at age 28 or 29, I helped take the company public. We listed on New York. We raised $300 million, which was the largest amount that had ever been raised on a mining IPO in New York. And remember, this was a year after the market crash of '87. So it was a hard time to raise money, and we did get the money raised. What did I learn from it? Well, first thing is, I got to meet all the biggest supplies of money to the mining industry in the world. We flew all over the world. We did 18 cities in 8 countries in 17 days raising this money. So I started to develop a network of investors. I also learned about investing. I didn't know anything about stocks and bonds and all that stuff. I got to learn all that on the job, on the fly, and it was a lot of fun because it was so new and so different and so alien from just being an observational scientist. But again, you know, business is about people. You meet people, you talk to people, you learn from people. It's never as hard as you think switching fields. Now, if I switch to become a statistician, well, that's a whole different matter. That's like pain and suffering and having to learn a lot of math I don't need to know. But in terms of business, it's about dealing with people and learning the fundamentals of how businesses work. So in the course of this, I had increased my network. I was in the right place at the right time. And I got to hobnob with the biggest mining executives in the world at conferences. And again, how did I use that? Expand my network. So Bond Gold, which Bond International Gold was the name of the company, it was subsequently sold. And one of the lessons I learned in being in investor relations is the extraordinary number of mineral companies that spend a lot of time promoting what they're going to do, but don't actually execute. And when you hang out with the big fund managers, they really don't like that. And unfortunately, it's an albatross in our business that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, but there's not a lot of execution. And I had learned this at Anaconda because right before I left Anaconda, I was the assistant to the vice president. And I'd sit in these board meetings where the board members would be making a call on future copper prices based on what was in the Wall Street Journal that morning. And 700 of us lost our jobs in one day because of that sort of management. So what I did is I saw a gap in the business, which was that nobody was providing boards of directors and senior management teams with quantitative data on what the markets were doing and opportunities and stuff like that. So having left Bond, I set up a consulting company to do that. Again, nobody had ever done it before. I talked to my family about it, and pretty much the response was, well, if you can pay the mortgage, spend the day any way you want. It was actually a very successful business. One of the side stories, just a quick one, was part of my severance package from Bond was that they had me analyzed by a business psychologist, which I thought was a bit foofy, you know. I had the time and they were paying for it, so why not? So I spent 3 days taking every bloody test you can think of, and then they analyzed it. And the guy sat me down and he said, I need to talk to you about your scores. So yeah, what's going on? He said, we have 11 categories that we measure you, okay? In 10 of the 11, you ranked in the top 95 percentile of all the testing, and they tested millions of people. And my answer wasn't, oh, isn't that great? It's like, all right, what about number 11? Well, you were in the lower 5% on number 11. Okay, what was that field? It was corporate politics. And it turns out that I have no appetite for corporate politics. I think that when we work, we should try to be productive and effective. Apparently that came through loud and clear on the test. He also told me that I would never be able to be an executive in a mining company or any big company until I was in my 40s. So what was I going to do for 15 years, 14, 15 years? So I built a consulting company. And I love consulting. You got so many different types of work assignments. The money was good, but not great. Consulting is really a lifestyle. It's not really a way to get rich. But as a consequence of the nature of the services I've provided, I got to not only meet more executives who were clients, but I also got to see how they thought and how they run their companies. And I absorbed all of that. I thought that was really important. I also learned another important lesson. You can't be everything to everybody. You have to recognize what your strengths are and build on them. But more importantly, you have to know what your weaknesses are. And with weaknesses, you can try to make them stronger, or don't take assignments where you're just too weak. It would be sort of like, you know, if a geologist got a consulting assignment to do litigation, you know, just don't take it, you're out of it. This may sound really obvious, but there's a huge gray area between what you know and what you don't know. And one of the keys to being successful is knowing when to cut and run, or when to stay in on something. And again, part of my work required me building these databases. So over time, long story short, I went back for 2 years and taking classes and got my certification as an appraiser, a mineral appraiser. There was only about 6 of us in the world, which was great for business because you had very little competition. And it was great. I got to fly all over the world, look at all these mines, figure out what they were worth. It was wonderful. Along the way, I got an assignment to appraise a royalty company. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what royalty companies do. And about halfway through the process, the owner said, hey, I just got a takeover bid for my company. Do you know how to negotiate? Well, I don't know. I'm from Jersey. I have the gift of gab. That sounds close enough. Yeah, sure, I'd love to. And so I helped her sell her company to Royal Gold, which is, you know, one of the finest and largest royalty companies. But what it really gave me is it gave me a 9-month PhD in how the royalty industry worked, because I would have to negotiate every week with them on some point, and then I go back and do my research and get my counter arguments and all that. I love the royalty model because it takes very few people to run a royalty company, and you can make a great deal of money because it's a very scalable type operation. So 2002 was rolling around. My research showed that the Chinese super cycle was getting ready to kick into full gear. That meant money was coming into the mining industry. I was turning 50, so my kids were getting ready to go to college. I needed to run a public company. That was how I was going to make my fortune. So I built a company called International Royalty Corporation. And it wasn't that hard. Granted, I'd never run a public company, but I had watched all these executives and learned from them. And because of my databases, I had a list of like 10,000 royalties. And what I did is I went to my clients and I said, hey, you got a bunch of royalties. Why don't you sell them to me? And their response was, because you have no money. I said, yes, but I'm going to go public. And they said, great, send us the money once you go public. So I bought about 60 odd royalties without putting a penny down. So I think I have learned how to negotiate along the way. So that's what we got. And one of the questions here, and one of the points I want to bring up is, why were these CEOs of these companies willing to give me tens of millions of dollars of assets without having to put a penny down? And this comes back to reputation. And I have this number 7 on here. Reputations are like virginity. You only lose them once. And this is really serious. And I think particularly among younger people, it's something that you may forget. Whether you have a mortgage or not, you're in a hurry to make money, or you think you can make millions of dollars. So, you cut a little corner, or you do something that isn't quite ethically correct, but if I do it once, nobody will ever catch me. No, don't do that. You will get caught every time. And if you want to have a good reputation, you need to treat people with respect. When you're negotiating or buying stuff, you don't have to beat them into submission. You need to get convergence of objectives, and just don't screw the opposition. I have no idea how much free data I gave away in my career, but I can tell you, because of my approach and I'm trying to make money. Let's make no mistake about that, but also try to be a force of good, try to advance the world, whether it's in business or socially. It pays you back in spades. And in my case, I got 6 deals without putting a penny down, because they knew me, they respected me, I respected them, we all got along. Basically, treat others how you want to be treated yourself. And I know it's sounds really cliche. It's really true. If you're doing something that you wouldn't want somebody to do to you, it's not going to help your reputation. Why is this important? Well, if you actually think about it, bad will ambassadors are far worse than goodwill ambassadors. And the reason is that bad will ambassadors, people who don't like you, will tell anybody who will listen. But goodwill ambassadors will only talk about you when asked. So you may have a lot of friends, and if they like you, they're not going to say anything about you unless somebody says, hey, do you know Doug, or something like that. But if you hurt somebody, they will tell anybody, don't work with that person, he's really bad. Be careful about that person, he's really bad. And it shuts down your opportunities, and it gives you a bad reputation. And I can tell you from 40 years, there are people in the mining industry, I won't even take their phone calls. They are bad apples. Unfortunately, the industry doesn't have a way to drive them out. But I just won't deal with them, because why should I? I don't deal with bad people. It's that simple. So the next thing was, I was building this company, International Royalty, and quick story. The way we did it is we got these deals, and then we had to go raise money. So we went back to the investment banking community. I knew many of the people from the different firms. And with 2 buddies of mine, we each went out and we literally, it's like what you see in movies. We maxed out our credit cards. We were dead broke. I had so much debt on my credit card that when I was in Vancouver for our very last meeting, 14 investment banks had turned us down. I'd actually set up a meeting to earn some consulting work so I could pay my bills when I got home. So we're in the last meeting, and we, start the pitch. We were 2 minutes into the pitch when the head guy said, stop. And we're like, oh God, here it comes. He goes, we'll take the whole deal. And that's how we launched. So we launched in 2003. We took the company public in 2005. It was the largest mining IPO on the Toronto Stock Exchange that year. And then we sold the company exactly 5 years later to the day, which was fun in itself. And the benefit was we sold at a massive premium. And my investors were extremely pleased, because they made a lot of money off of me. And I made a lot of money too. Again, we're doing this to make money, right? So the question is, why was I qualified to run a public company? Well, my databases gave me the information to build it. My skills with Bond Gold gave me the contacts in the investment community and the skills to raise money. And my research told me it was time to build a public company. I don't want you to walk away thinking everything I touch turns to gold or silver. I've had 1,000 bad ideas, But this one, building International Royalty Corporation, was a really good idea, as proven. So what about the other 999? Here's the key. You got to know when to walk from a deal. When you start working on a deal, it gets its own natural momentum. You can feel it every day. You're making headway, you're making progress. Yeah, there's gonna be some stumbling blocks, but you're not gonna come in any walls. When you start seeing walls, you have to hold back and figure it out. The trick to being successful is killing bad deals as fast as you can, and then look for the next potentially good deal. This is really, really important. And so I retired in 2010. I spent the rest of the year doing important things like fishing and skiing. But unfortunately, I discovered that none of my friends could go fishing or skiing on a Tuesday. And my social life is in the mining industry because I spent my whole life traveling around the world. So what was I going to do? Well, the private equity firms saw what I had done with International Royalty, how much money I'd made for my investors, and they all wanted me to come work for them. And I can give you a whole separate lecture on how private equity works, but here's the bottom line. They said, you put in half of your personal wealth into our firm and we'll give you 5% of the action. Or I can go fishing every day. I don't need to work, right? But Oscar Lunowski, we were with Red Kite at that time, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. It was a very, very, really wonderful offer. And quite frankly, I don't need the money, but so it was more for the challenge, the glory, and I've given most of that money away to my universities. In the mining world, the private equity is the top of the pyramid. And over the last 10 years, I helped Orion build itself. Orion was a spinoff from Red Kite. I have helped build it into one of the world's largest mining private equity funds. We currently manage $7 billion. I think the next largest fund manages maybe $4 billion. We're huge. And we have investments in about 50 or 60 companies around the world, helping them build their mine. But I have to tell you, and maybe it's my age, but I didn't really advance my life education at Orion. I attribute this more to the fact that I'm mentally retired. I kind of, once you've been successful and made your money or whatever, you don't need to learn as much because you've made it. And so it doesn't really require you to learn a lot more. And it's an interesting thing about retirement. I know you're all 40 years away from retirement, but as you make this transition that I'm going through right now, this life learning shifts to other subjects, but you don't necessarily need it for work. But in work, you should try to be a sponge for knowledge. You should try to absolutely absorb everything you can. Always try to learn more. Don't try to put blinders on saying, I only study tailings, so I don't care about mining. Try to learn it all because that's where your opportunity set comes from. So just finishing this up, going forward, I retire in December. I'm going to spend the rest of my life teasing my grandchildren and fish, and not necessarily in that order. So one of the things I taught my kids, and my kids are older than you, but they were your age at one point, is I encounter a lot of people along the way who are always complaining about their lives. And the only person responsible for making you happy is yourself. So if you're not happy, it's your fault. Nobody else's. Don't blame the professor when you get a C, or in my case, an F in metamorphic pictrology. Don't do that. That's not fair to them. It's your fault. And if you're unhappy, you should change. And I've given you how I've gone from being a geologist looking at alteration patterns on drill holes to helping run one of the largest private equity firms in the world. Every step along the way, I was happy as a clam. I assume clams are happy. But if I was not happy, I changed. And sometimes that change is radical. Sometimes that change means you won't even have a job for a while. But listen, you only live once. And why do you want to be miserable? It makes no sense. So my biggest takeaway is don't waste time being unhappy. And the sun will come up tomorrow, and there's so many exciting things to do in this world. And you, of course, have the benefit that you getting training at Arizona. And I can tell you from the other professionals I know who are some of the top in the mining business, they're wildcats. It really is a wonderful school. Thank you. Oh, right on the 30-minute money. Yes.
Precisely. You got it spot on.
So
Practice.
We're going to have time for questions now. So if anyone wants to either speak up or post in the chat and anything you guys want to ask.
Hey, Mr. Silver. First off, thank you for your talk. That was quite phenomenal. I wanted to ask, given that we all have a variety of possible routes for education, like, for example, I could go online and start learning stats or financials, kind of a broad range. How would you suggest we prioritize what we're taking in?
Well, it really depends on where do you want to go? Where are you headed with this current chapter of your life?
For me, I'm probably heading into artisanal and small scale mining. I'm a mining engineer in geology major, and so I'm gonna go help people improve practices.
Yeah, so in your case, I mean, other than the technical skills that you need to do that, I would strongly suggest you take classes in political science, government policy, because most of those help programs are funded by various parastatal or government organizations. So you need to learn not only the trade, but more importantly, you need to learn the mentality and the politics of how those groups work. And then obviously you're gonna have to learn about 50 languages, but that's a different issue.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Can I ask you a follow-up?
Sure.
So I guess when you were entering your various fields, was that ever your intention to go into those fields? I mean, like, what were you preparing for?
Yeah, so in college, I had no idea what I would do with a career, and getting a degree in zoology, I assumed I was gonna work in a zoo. No, just kidding. There's not a lot in zoology that's not government or academics, and I wanted to be in business. I always wanted to make a lot of money. So when I decided to go into mining, that's how I picked the mining schools. But once I was in mining, it really was, you kind of grow up in your own head and you're doing something for a long time, and then something comes along that may not be what you've been trained for in academia, but you find it fascinating. And it's kind of like if you pick up a new sport, you find it fascinating. And then if you're like me, after 2 weeks, you go back to the old one. If you find something like that, it's fascinating for a reason, and maybe you can't see it perceptually, but subliminally, it's changing you. And why not go chase something that's fascinating rather than doing the humdrum of whatever you're doing? And that's these decisions I make. I mean, I often say I followed my heart more than my head, but it's not really your heart. It's your sense of curiosity. As a child, I was infinitely curious. I think it's probably my strongest attribute is my mom, who was always throwing me into strange environments to expand my horizons. So I'm fascinated with everything, but some stuff's more fascinating than others. And that more fascinating stuff is what I chase. And like I said, you can retrain for anything. It's really not that hard. You just got to put in the time and learn. So you have to kind of think each step of the way. You may get down there and find that, you encounter some people that are doing an underground mine and you find that more interesting than artisanal. So maybe you switch over. That's the sort of changes I'm talking about.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
So I know that you mentioned like knowing when you're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned networking with like mines and stuff. So my question is like, what would you suggest the best way to network with like mining companies?
Yeah, you have a couple choices. What year are you in school?
Junior.
Junior, okay. So you have a couple things. One is you have professors who will know people in the industry. And I know, because I know Mark Barton really well, he's always creating situations where students interact with business people. That's key. You need to go to conferences. And at conferences, don't huddle in the corner with all your buddies from Arizona. Go out and shake hands with older people and ask them what they do and who they work for. We were just like you at some point. Walking up to a total stranger at a mining conference, odds are they're in the mining business, and that's where you want to be. And we like students. Everybody I know my age, we like students because you're the future of our business. But how do we meet you if you don't create the situation? And I can give you an example. You know, SME at the annual meeting every year, Arizona has a cocktail party. Now I haven't made one in a while, but normally when I go in there, I see two groups of people. I see all the students in one corner and all the industry people in the other. And it makes no sense to me because we're all wildcats. Why aren't we introducing ourselves to each other? And what you have to do is you have to walk up and introduce yourself. Go up, introduce yourself, tell them what year you are, what you're studying, ask them what they do, ask them for a business card. If you have one, give them a business card. And then you can always follow up later saying, oh, I remember we met at the SME Arizona function. Hey, I'm looking for a job. I want to do this. Can you help me? And if they say no, say, well, do you know anybody who might be interested? And start using their network to help you build your network. And it's a very simple thing to do, but I know people are shy, particularly young people are shy meeting older people. That's why we're at the conference. We're there to meet people. We're there to interact. And if you're students, we're there to help you. But we can't do it alone. We need you to come and talk to us as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Silver. Thanks for your time today. I have
Sure.
a question. I'm wondering about what you've learned over your years of job hopping in terms of evaluating a culture of a company or a group and trying to determine whether or not they're good to work for or work with.
That's a great question. So first of all, if you have a strong network, you go into that network and ask them what they think of the company. Ask them what they think of people. There's nothing, we still do it, even when we're investing in a company. Yeah, we'll have professional, headhunters and stuff, review resumes and all that, but I will go into my network and find people who have worked with these people and say, off the record, what's Joe like? And they'll say, good, bad, or indifferent. That's how you do it. Corporate culture, if you start reading the mining press or NGOs or whatever you can read, you'll start seeing that different companies have different reputations. That can play a role if they align with you or if they don't align with you. There's many ways you can do it without just going to their website and seeing what they say. But again, it's a people business. Build a network where you can ask people or you have friends. I have one friend, I'll give you an example. I have one friend in Nevada, which anytime I'm looking at a deal in Nevada, I call him and I say, what do you know about so-and-so? And the information he has on people, he can tell you who was at what bar last night drinking what kind of drink. I mean, he networks in a way that he's like the Olympian of networking. But if you want to get some off the record information, particularly if it's a social issue or something very sensitive, you want to have a strong network. And the way you build a network is you trade data. You meet people, but if you can trade data, then they're going to call you when they need something. And there's no money exchanged. It's just friends taking care of friends. One of my cardinal rules is the only people going to take care of us in the mining business is us. Nobody from the outside. So we have an obligation to take care of each other and help each other, whether it's getting a new job or looking at opportunities or what have you.
Thank you.
Okay. That's it.
Yeah, any other last questions? You have Doug Silver here. Anything? No, not anything.
No.
Great, I'll bite. First off, thank you for taking the time. My name is Lynette. I'm probably in a bit different situation than some of the students here because I'm coming back mid-career to do a PhD with Isabel Barton, and I have worked in the industry for a number of years. So, including reporting up through finance as well, but certainly not on this level. So, my question is, when you are making a big pivot like that, and people, if do you have any tips or strategies, when people kind of question your qualifications when you're kind of early on and doing something new?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because usually if you pivot, it depends on how you pivot. All of my pivots were from people above me saying, hey, you need to do this. So it was more the door was open and somebody was inviting me to walk through. If on the other hand, you want to pivot, the best thing you can do is to find a mentor who can help you. In other words, I don't know what you're thinking of pivoting to, but have somebody who's an expert in that field open doors for you, or guide you in the sense of sit down and buy them a lunch or have a beer or something, and throw your questions at them to make sure that the pivot you're thinking about is really what you want to do. Sometimes when you look at stuff from the outside, it's quite different from the inside. So it's always good to get your nose under the tent and ask a lot of questions before you jump into it. But find somebody in your network that can mentor you on that change.
Thank you.
Sure. By the way, just a follow-up. A lot of people know me because I'm originally a geologist, and they all want to get into mine finance because you make a lot of money and it sounds like it's really glorious, and you only have to work 100-hour weeks. I mean, what more could you ask for in life? But a lot of these are students, and I have no problem if you have a particular area of mine finance or any of the fields that I've been in. If you've got questions, just email me, because I don't remember how I started this. I couldn't get my first job. I didn't have anybody to open that door for me. And I don't mind helping you because I know everybody, you don't know anybody. So use me as a resource. Even after I retire and as long as I'm not fishing, I'd be happy to talk to you.
I guess I have a question then, going off of that same thing. So I'm a senior, I'm looking at graduate school, and I guess I kind of just picked one of my interests and have been like really going for it, but I'm not really certain that like that's what I really want to do. If you know what I mean, like,
yeah,
it's just one of my many interests.
So what is the interest you're pursuing?
Geochronology.
Okay,
So,
and why do you find it fascinating?
Because I'm literally like getting a time of the earth, like I'm literally dating the events and what took place and all of that. That's just fascinating.
Okay, so if you're going to be in geochronology, that means you want to spend your career working for government or academia. Is that true?
Yeah, more academia in my, like,
okay,
I think.
Well, so you picked a fairly narrow field, at least from my knowledge base, but no matter what you do, no matter what field you're in, you will learn other things outside of your field. I'll give you an example, because as a geologist, we had to do budgets. That's accounting. We had to do, and back in those days, we had permitting, groups in the company that do our permitting. Nowadays, a lot of the geos have to do their own permitting. That's social, that's legal. Watch the peripheral fields that are related to what you do, and see if any of them fascinate you more than what you're doing. That'll start moving your, as the gal before said, start moving your pivot. Or you may find that all of those related fields don't interest you as much as where you are, in which case, you've hit the mark on what you want to do. But my problem is that I'm infinitely curious. So I'm always kind of looking over the fence at, oh, I wonder how you do that. And then next thing you know, I'm working in that field. But that's just me. That's just the way I'm designed. So, but you'll encounter a lot of other fields, even in academia. I mean, I've sat on a geoscience board and the mining engineering board at Arizona for a total of 15 years. And I can't tell you how many different fields I was exposed to. And if I was 30 years old, I'd probably go in all of them, because they're all really fascinating. And guys at Arizona just do so much interesting stuff. But you got to just kind of think about where you are. What's the world around you like? It's not just like this, it's like that. And maybe you'll find something that interests you more.
Yeah. Okay. Just don't gotta keep the focus wide, like you're saying.
Yeah. So let me give you a really bad example. I have spent the last 10 years sponsoring research and fisheries science in Colorado. And one of the things that we do is we pull the ear bone out of fish, because they're just like tree rings, and we can calculate the age of the fish. Who would have ever thought tree rings and fish ear bones have anything in common? So it's fascinating, because I'm familiar with tree rings from paleolimnology, which is another one of my hobbies. But it's a related field. It may not be trees, may not be, argon dating, but it's a related field. So if you ever want to know how old a fish is, just give me a buzz.
Will do.
That question doesn't come up too often. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions for today? We're almost out of time, and I know
Yeah.
many of you have classes very soon.
Ooh.
I was just curious what your email is. So
It's D as in dog, U as in umbrella, G as in goat, A as in apple, G as in goat, at, and you'll love this part, AOL.com. There are people who still use AOL because it never crashes. It's not a Microsoft product, thank God.
can you repeat that one more time? Sorry, I just want to make sure I got it down.
DUGAG.
Got it.
Okay.
Awesome.
DUG is Doug, just past tense of dig, right? AG is the chemical symbol for silver. Do I not have the perfect mining name?
Well,
No, but seriously, along the way, if you have a follow-up question, please use me. Everybody at Arizona and the geoscience and mining group, they all know I'm a resource to Wildcats. And you know, you may see me in an SME cocktail party. You won't see me in any of the technical talks, but cocktail party, I'll definitely be there. Come up and introduce yourself to me. Remind me that we met. And if you want me to introduce you to people, it would be my privilege. Okay?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck with your careers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.